Yeah, I did say that, and I was half joking, but my point was that there is a similarity between Plato and what fantasy literature does, in that both create secondary spaces for thought experiment. I mean, many philosophers do this. They create unreal places as an abstract space in which to think. So Plato creates his Republic. It's a very, very famous example, of course. But there are, of course, many other examples. So Thomas More's Utopia from the beginning of the 16th century, or maybe a more recent example would be John Rawls' imaginary society in A Theory of Justice. So he creates this imaginary society in order to think about the social contract. So the point is, of course, that all of these philosophers, Plato, More, and Rawls, they create a no place, a utopia, no place, in order so that they can experiment with ideas. And this is no different from what a lot of fantasy writers do. Not all fantasy writers, of course, but writers like Terry Pratchett or China Miéville, they do the same thing. They create a no place, inexistent space, in order that they can play with ideas. And the only real difference is that someone like Terry Pratchett is a lot more interesting to read than Plato. Yeah, I think actually that fantasy's ability to create this no places, this inexistent space, is actually crucial to its radical potential, because in an inexistent space, supposedly self-evident or common sense ideas can be radically questioned and re-examined. So, I mean, so-called common sense is often not common sense at all, but rather a cultural practice that wants to place itself beyond scrutiny by labelling itself as common sense. And it's actually really hard to see this in the real world, and it's hard to see it in realist literature as well. But this is much, much easier to see in fantasy literature. And this is because fantasy can ask very, very basic questions that makes you examine your own assumptions. So some examples, I mean, for example, in Terry Pratchett's The Truth, it's asking a very, very basic question: what is a newspaper? Or another example from Pratchett would be in Making Money, and this is a very similar question. It's asking, what is a bank? You know, in both of these novels, we're talking about the first newspaper in Discworld, or the first bank in Discworld. They have to be built from the ground up. So the characters in these novels, they don't have any assumptions about what is a bank or what is a newspaper. In other words, they don't have the assumptions that we do. And of course, the effect of this is to draw attention to our own assumptions about banks or newspapers.